The massive ship floated silently in the darkness of space, its hull covered in the scars of ancient battles. Around it, hundreds more vessels stretched into the distance, a graveyard of metal giants that had stood guard over this empty sector for centuries. Admiral Reed stood on the bridge of his scout ship, the asterisk Stellar Vision asterisk, his expression a mixture of amusement and disappointment. The holographic displays showed detailed scans of the derelict fleet, their archaic designs making him shake his head. "Look at these things," he said, gesturing at the nearest ship. "They're built like cargo containers with engines strapped on. No elegance, no proper energy shielding systems, just chunks of metal welded together." The scout team had stumbled upon this fleet during a routine patrol of the outer sectors. Initial scans showed the ships were at least 300 years old, their designs completely alien to modern sensibilities. Instead of the sleek, energy-efficient vessels used by the Galactic Council, these were brutal, angular constructions that seemed to prioritize armor over aesthetics. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Baker from his scanning station, "you need to see these readings. The hull composition is strange." Reed walked over, his perfectly pressed uniform reflecting the blue light of the holographic displays. "Strange how?" "It's layered, sir. Dozens of different metal alloys compressed together. Some of them we can't even identify. And the thickness." Baker shook his head. "It's nearly 10 meters thick in some places." "Wasteful," Reed muttered. "No wonder whoever built these abandoned them. The energy cost to move such heavy ships must have been astronomical." The Admiral turned to Dr. Thompson, the human archaeologist who had been quietly observing from the back of the bridge. "Well, Doctor, any thoughts on this collection of space junk?" Thompson moved forward slowly, his eyes fixed on the scans. He was an older man with gray hair and weathered features, one of the few humans working with the Galactic Council's archaeological division. "These ships," he said softly, "they weren't built for show." "Obviously not," Reed laughed. "They're hideous." "No, you don't understand," Thompson continued, his finger tracing the outline of one massive vessel. "Look at the weapon mounts. Those aren't energy projectors or plasma cannons. They're railguns, massive ones, and these protrusions along the sides. Point defense systems, hundreds of them." Reed waved his hand dismissively. "Primitive kinetic weapons, hardly worth noting." "Sir," Baker interrupted again, "we're picking up power readings. Very faint, but they're there. These ships aren't completely dead." This caught Reed's attention. "What? After all this time?" Thompson moved to another display, his expression growing more concerned. "The power systems. They're nuclear. Fusion reactors, heavily shielded. They could theoretically run for centuries," Baker finished. "These ships could power up again if given the right commands." Reed frowned. Something about this discovery would have to be reported to the Council, but he didn't want to waste too much time on it. "Mark the location and log it as a low-priority archaeological site. We'll leave a small security detail to keep salvagers away. But that's it." "Admiral," Thompson said urgently, "I really think we should investigate further. These designs, they remind me of something. Old stories from Earth's early space age." "Doctor," Reed said condescendingly, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these are clearly failed experiments from some long-gone civilization. Probably one that destroyed itself trying to maintain such an inefficient fleet. We have real work to do." As the asterisk Stellar Vision asterisk prepared to leave, Thompson remained at the viewing window, staring at the ancient ships. In his mind, he was remembering stories his grandfather used to tell him. Stories about humanity's first great war among the stars. A war so terrible that they chose to forget it, to bury the knowledge so deep that it became legend. But as he looked at those massive battle-scarred hulls, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's forgotten past was about to become very important to the galaxy's future. He just hoped they would realize it before it was too late. Dr. Thompson couldn't sleep. For 3 days straight, he had been reviewing old Earth records, searching for something to prove his suspicions. His small office aboard the Galactic Council's research station was covered in holographic projections showing ancient ship designs and historical documents. Computer, cross-reference these hull patterns with Earth's pre-Council Space Navy again, he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. The computer hummed softly as it processed his request. A knock at his door made him look up. Dr. Allen, his longtime research partner, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "You look terrible, Marcus," she said, handing him one of the cups. "Jane, I found something," Thompson said, taking a grateful sip. "Look at this." He pulled up an old Earth military document, its edges faded with age. "This is from the classified archives, dated about 300 years ago. Project Iron Wall." Dr. Allen leaned in, her eyes widening as she read. A fleet of over 1,000 ships designed to fight something that conventional weapons couldn't touch. She looked at Thompson. "You think these are the same ships we found?" "Not just think. I know." Thompson stood up and started pacing. "The dimensions match. The weapon layouts are identical. Even the hull composition. It's the same layered armor design we saw out there. But why would Earth build such a fleet and then abandon it?" Allen asked, frowning at the documents. "That's the part that worries me." Thompson pulled up another file. "There are fragments of reports, heavily redacted, about a threat that appeared in human space before we joined the Council, something that nearly wiped us out." He pointed to several blurry images showing massive organic-looking shapes moving through space. Whatever it was, our normal weapons couldn't hurt it. Energy weapons were useless. So humanity did what it does best. We adapted, built ships specifically designed to counter this threat. "We should take this to the Council immediately," Allen said, already moving toward the door. "I tried." Thompson's voice was bitter. "Had a meeting with the Defense Committee this morning. They laughed me out of the room." The recording of the meeting played in the air between them. Thompson could be seen presenting his findings while the council members exchanged amused glances. "Dr. Thompson," one council member said in the recording, "you're suggesting we divert resources to study obsolete technology based on what? Some old human fairy tales. These ships were built for a reason," Thompson's recorded voice insisted. "They're defensive platforms designed to protect against a specific threat. A threat that might still exist. The Council has the most advanced fleet in known space," another member responded. "If this mysterious threat of yours still existed, our sensors would have detected it. Your primitive kinetic weapons and thick armor are relics of a less enlightened age." The recording ended, leaving the office in silence. "They're fools," Allen said quietly. "But why can't we find more information about this threat? Why would humanity forget something so important?" Thompson pulled up one last document, its security clearance higher than anything they usually dealt with. "Because we chose to forget. Look at this." After the threat was defeated, there was a deliberate effort to bury the knowledge. The trauma was too great. The fleet was sent away, hidden, and over generations, it became just another story. But someone must have known. Allen protested. Someone must have remembered. "They did." Thompson pointed to a small notation at the bottom of the document. "There's a quote here from the fleet's last admiral. We hide these ships not because we're ashamed, but because we're afraid. Not of the enemy. We beat them. We're afraid of ourselves, of what we had to become to win. But we leave this fleet as our gift to the future. Because they'll come back. They always come back." A sudden alert cut through their conversation. The station's emergency channels lit up with urgent messages. Both scientists rushed to the main communications screen. "Multiple unknown contacts detected in Sector 7, a panicked voice announced. They're not showing up on our normal scanners, but they're there. Energy weapons having no effect. 3 council ships already lost. They're like nothing we've ever seen." Thompson and Allen shared a knowing look. The ancient enemy had returned, just as humanity had feared it would. But would anyone listen to them in time? The council's main chamber had never been so quiet. On the massive display screen, they watched helplessly as another defense fleet was torn apart by the unknown enemy. The swarm, as people had started calling them, moved like a living tide through space, their bioorganic ships shrugging off the most powerful energy weapons as if they were nothing. Admiral Reed stood before the council, his earlier confidence replaced by barely hidden fear. "We've lost contact with 4 more colony worlds," he reported, his voice shaking. "Our best ships, our most advanced weapons, they're useless against these things." The council leader, an old man named Wilson, leaned forward in his chair. "How many ships have we lost?" 217 in the last 3 days alone," Reed answered. "Their shields, they're like nothing we've ever seen. They adapt to our energy weapons within minutes. Even our strongest plasma cannons just bounce off them now." A new alert flashed across the screen. Another invasion force had been detected, this one heading straight for one of their most populated systems. The room erupted in panic. "Order all civilian ships to evacuate," Wilson commanded. "Get those people out of there." "Sir," a young officer interrupted, rushing into the chamber. "Dr. Thompson is demanding to speak to the council. He says he knows what these things are." Wilson looked at the other council members, then nodded. "Send him in." Thompson hurried in, followed by Dr. Allen. Both carried stacks of old data tablets. "They're called the Devourers," Thompson said without preamble, "and humanity fought them before." The chamber went silent again, all eyes turning to the human archaeologist. 300 years ago, they appeared in human space. Thompson continued, spreading out ancient battle reports on the central table. "They destroyed our colonies, adapted to our weapons, seemed unstoppable. Just like now." He activated a hologram showing one of the ancient ships they had discovered. "That's why we built that fleet. Those primitive kinetic weapons, they were designed specifically to counter the Devourers' adaptive shields. Their shields can stop energy weapons, but they can't adapt to physical impacts. Those massive railguns can fire tungsten rounds at a significant fraction of light speed." "And the thick armor?" Reed asked, beginning to understand. "The Devourers' only effective weapons are biological," Allen explained, pointing to another report. "They shoot spores that eat through normal hull materials, but they can't digest the layered alloys in those ships. Every layer has a different composition, making it impossible for the spores to adapt." On the screen, they watched as another Council defense fleet engaged the swarm. The sleek, modern ships fired their energy weapons uselessly against the biological horrors. Within minutes, the Council ships were overwhelmed, their beautiful hulls dissolving under the Devourers' attacks. "Our ancestors beat them," Thompson said firmly. "But the war was so horrible, the costs so high, that humanity chose to forget. They locked away the knowledge, hid the fleet, hoped it would never be needed again. But they left us the tools we'd need, just in case. And now we need them," Wilson whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. A new alert sounded, worse than before. The Devourers had changed course. They were heading straight for the Council's capital world. "How long?" Wilson asked, his face pale. "At their current speed, 3 days," Reed answered. "That fleet you dismissed as obsolete," Thompson said, looking at Reed, "is less than 1 day's travel from here. Those ships were built for exactly this fight. Their eyes are simple but effective, their weapons specifically designed to kill these monsters. We just need to wake them up." Wilson stood, his decision made. "Dr. Thompson, you have full authority. Take whatever resources you need. Get those ships running." As Thompson and Allen rushed out, Reed followed them. "I'm sorry," the Admiral said quietly. "I should have listened." "Later," Thompson replied, checking a data tablet. "Right now, we need to get to that fleet, and pray that after 300 years, those old ships still have some fight left in them." Behind them, the Council chamber screen showed more Devourer ships appearing, their twisted, organic forms blotting out the stars. The galaxy's most advanced civilization was about to learn a harsh lesson about the dangers of dismissing primitive technology. And humanity's forgotten guardians were about to wake up for one more battle. The old fleet hung in space before them, dark and silent. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Allen, and Admiral Reed stood on the bridge of their shuttle as they approached the largest ship in the formation. Its hull stretched for nearly 2 kilometers, dwarfing their small vessel. "Look at these markings," Allen said, pointing to faded letters on the hull. Through layers of space dust, they could make out the words, EDS Titan, Earth Defense Ship 001. Their shuttle's lights illuminated more of the massive vessel, revealing heavy battle damage that had been patched with thick plates of layered armor. The ship was ugly by modern standards, but it had the solid look of something built to last. "The main airlock still has power," Thompson noted, checking his instruments. "The nuclear reactors have been running on minimal power all these years, keeping basic systems alive." Their shuttle docked with a loud clang. As they walked through the airlock, emergency lights flickered to life, responding to the first movement in centuries. The air was stale but breathable. "This way," Thompson said, leading them toward the bridge. "The ship's main computer core should be there. If we can access it, we might learn exactly how these ships fought the Devourers." The corridors were huge, built to allow quick movement of crew and equipment. Everything was oversized, overbuilt, with backup systems for the backup systems. They passed rows of massive railgun ammunition, each round bigger than a person. "These ships weren't just built to fight," Allen observed, running her hand along a wall. "They were built to survive. Look at these internal walls, same layered armor as the hull. Even if the outer hull was breached, each section could hold against the Devourers' weapons." They reached the bridge, a cavernous room filled with sturdy control stations. No fancy holograms here. Everything was built with physical switches and screens, protected against any form of electronic warfare. Thompson moved to the main computer terminal. "Simple but effective," he muttered, powering it up. They knew the Devourers could hack complex systems, so they kept everything as basic as possible. The screen came to life, showing lines of text. "Earth Defense Ship Titan. Main computer online. Awaiting authorization." Thompson pulled out an old data tablet. "Found this in the Earth archives. Should have the command codes. There." The bridge hummed to life around them. Screens lit up, showing the ship's status. Despite centuries of sleep, most systems were still functional. Playing main log, the computer announced in a simple mechanical voice. An image appeared on the main screen, an old admiral recording his final message. "To whoever finds this fleet, if you're watching this, the Devourers have returned. These ships contain everything we learned about fighting them. Their bioorganic ships are nearly impossible to destroy with energy weapons, but they can't adapt to kinetic impacts. Our railguns fire specially designed rounds that fragment on impact, causing massive physical damage they can't heal from." The message continued. "The hull armor is layered with different materials because their spores can only digest one type of metal at a time. By the time they adapt to one layer, they die before reaching the next. The computer systems are deliberately simple. They can't hack what they can't interface with." Reed watched in amazement as the Admiral detailed more of the ship's features. "Your ancestors thought of everything," he said to Thompson. "They had to," Thompson replied grimly. "It was adapt or die." Suddenly, their shuttle's emergency channel crackled to life. "Dr. Thompson, the Devourers have broken through another defense line. They'll reach the capital in less than 2 days now." Thompson looked at the others. "We need to wake up these ships. Fast." He turned back to the computer. "Computer, begin full system startup. Activate all weapons and defensive systems." Around them, the massive ship began to wake up. They could hear the deep rumble of nuclear reactors powering up, the whine of weapon systems coming online, the clank of ammunition being loaded into the railguns. "Warning," the computer announced. "Devourer biological signatures detected in nearby space. Recommend immediate combat preparation." Through the bridge windows, they could see other ships in the fleet lighting up, responding to the Titan's wake-up call. These ancient vessels, built by a humanity that had faced extinction and survived, were about to show the galaxy why simple solutions were sometimes the best ones. The Devourers were about to meet their old enemy again, and this time, humanity remembered how to fight them. The EDS Titan shuddered as its ancient engines fired for the first time in centuries. Around it, nearly 1,000 other ships of the forgotten fleet were coming alive, their massive forms breaking free from their long slumber. "Main reactor at 85% capacity," the computer reported. "All weapons systems online. Combat AI activating." Dr. Thompson worked frantically at the main control station, with Dr. Allen and Admiral Reed coordinating from other terminals. The bridge was now fully lit, displays showing the status of every ship in the fleet. "Look at these readings," Allen called out, pointing to her screen. "Each ship has enough ammunition stored to fight for months." They really did think of everything. The computer suddenly flashed a warning. "Alert! Multiple Devourer signatures detected. Enemy bioships approaching from Vector 227. Reed rushed to the tactical display. "They must have detected our power-up sequence. 30 Devourer ships heading straight for us." His face paled. "These are the same ones that destroy our most advanced battle group like it was nothing." Thompson's hands flew over the controls. "Computer, initiate combat protocol Alpha. All ships to battle formations." He looked at the others. "Let's see if humanity's old guardians still remember how to fight." The fleet moved with surprising grace for its size, the ships arranging themselves into a massive defensive sphere. The Titan took position at the center, its enormous railguns tracking the approaching enemy. "Enemy ships will be in range in 3 minutes," the computer announced calmly. "Show me the railgun targeting system," Thompson commanded. The main screen shifted, displaying a complex firing solution. "These guns don't just fire solid rounds. Each shell is designed to fragment into thousands of pieces, creating a spread pattern the Devourers can't dodge." The first Devourer ships came into view, twisted, organic forms that seemed to drink in the light around them. They moved like a swarm of angry insects, their bioweapons already beginning to glow with deadly energy. "They're charging weapons," Reed reported tensely. "Same type that ate through our modern ships like they were paper." "Railguns locked on target," the computer announced. "Permission to engage." Thompson took a deep breath. "Fire." The Titan shuddered as its main guns fired. Massive tungsten rounds accelerated to near-light speed, each one carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through a small moon. The other ships in the fleet fired in sequence, creating a wall of metal moving at relativistic speeds. On the tactical display, they watched as the rounds reached their targets. The Devourers' advanced shields, so effective against energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper against this ancient but devastating attack. Each round split into thousands of fragments, turning into expanding clouds of hypersonic metal shrapnel. 3 Devourer ships simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the kinetic barrage. 2 more spun away, their organic hulls shredded. "Direct hits confirmed," the computer reported. "Enemy shields ineffective against kinetic weapons. 5 ships destroyed or disabled." The remaining Devourers returned fire, their bioweapons launching clouds of corrosive spores toward the human fleet. But the ancient ships' layered armor held firm, the spores dying as they tried to eat through the constantly changing metal alloys. "All ships, continue firing," Thompson ordered. "Maintain bullet hell protocol." The space between the fleets filled with tungsten rounds and fragments, creating a deadly field of metal that the Devourer ships couldn't navigate. One by one, the biological horrors were torn apart by humanity's primitive weapons. "Enemy fleet retreating," the computer announced after several intense minutes. 27 ships confirmed destroyed. 3 escaping at FTL speeds. The bridge crew let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. By the stars, Reed whispered, staring at the tactical display. We just destroyed more Devourers in one engagement than the entire Council fleet has managed in weeks. No, Thompson corrected him, watching the retreating enemy signatures. We didn't just destroy them. We scared them. They remember these ships, remember what humanity did to them centuries ago. He turned to face the others. And now, they know we remember too. The computer interrupted with a new alert. Message from Council Command. The main Devourer fleet has altered course, moving away from the capital. They are retreating from all engaged sectors. Alan smiled grimly. They thought they were hunting us. But they just rediscovered who the real predators are. Around them, the ancient fleet of humanity stood ready, its simple but devastating weapons primed for war. The Devourers were about to learn why some knowledge should never be forgotten, and why laughing at primitive technology was a deadly mistake. The Council's emergency command center was filled with tension as they watched the massive holographic display. The main Devourer fleet, over 300 bioships strong, had regrouped and was now heading straight for Earth's ancient fleet. They're not running anymore, Dr. Thompson said, standing at the tactical station aboard the Titan. They're angry. Admiral Reed nodded grimly. They're coming in full force. No more testing our defenses. This is their main attack. The ancient fleet had positioned itself between the Devourers and the populated systems of the Council. 1,000 ships, built centuries ago, preparing to face an enemy they were specifically designed to destroy. All ships reporting ready, Dr. Allen announced from her station. Nuclear reactors at full power. Ammunition stores topped off. Point defense systems online. Thompson looked at the tactical display, watching the enemy approach. Computer, send battle plan Omega to all ships. Just like in the history files, we're going to show them why they feared us. The ancient fleet split into 3 groups. The heavy battleships, led by the Titan, formed a central wall. Smaller, faster ships moved to the flanks, their engines glowing hot as they prepared to execute a complex maneuver that had worked centuries ago. Enemy fleet entering weapons range in 2 minutes, the computer announced calmly. Reed watched in amazement as the primitive ships moved with perfect coordination. How are they so precise? These ships are centuries old. Simple systems, Thompson replied, checking the weapon readouts. No fancy AI that can be hacked. Just basic combat computers doing one job perfectly. Sometimes the old ways are better. The Devourers struck first, launching a massive wave of bioweapons. The space between the fleets filled with glowing spores and organic projectiles designed to eat through ship hulls. Initiating point defense barrage, Allen called out. Thousands of smaller railguns on the ancient ships opened fire, filling space with a wall of metal. The biological weapons were shredded before they could reach their targets. Main guns target the center of their formation. Thompson ordered, fire on my mark. The Titan's massive railguns adjusted their aim, targeting solutions appearing on the main screen. Each gun was loaded with specially designed rounds, massive tungsten projectiles that would fragment into thousands of pieces. Fire. The ancient fleet's main guns fired as one. The sound of the railguns thundered through the ship's hulls, the recoil making even the massive vessels shudder. A wall of metal accelerated to near-light speed shot toward the Devourer fleet. The biological ships tried to dodge, their organic forms twisting in impossible ways. But the fragmenting rounds created a spread pattern too wide to avoid. Dozens of Devourer ships were torn apart in the first volley. Flanking units, execute maneuver now, Thompson commanded. The smaller ships at the edges of the formation suddenly accelerated, swinging around in a complex pattern that the history files called the hammer and anvil. As the Devourers focused on the main battle line, the flanking ships caught them in a devastating crossfire. Their shields are failing, Allen reported excitedly. They can't adapt to multiple impact angles at once. The battle became chaos as hundreds of ships exchanged fire. The Devourer's biological weapons splashed harmlessly against the ancient fleet's layered armor, while humanity's kinetic weapons tore through the enemy with devastating efficiency. Enemy ships breaking formation, the computer reported, detecting multiple FTL drive signatures. On the main screen, they watched as the Devourer fleet began to collapse. Ship after ship either exploded under the relentless kinetic barrage or turned to flee. "They're running," Reed whispered in disbelief. "We've actually beaten them." "Not just beaten," Thompson corrected, watching the tactical display. "We've routed them completely, just like our ancestors did centuries ago." The final numbers told the story. Over 200 Devourer ships destroyed, the rest in full retreat. The ancient fleet had lost only 12 ships, their layered armor and simple but effective defenses proving just as powerful as they had been centuries ago. As the council leaders cheered and congratulated each other, Thompson stood quietly at his station, thinking about the humans who had built these ships. They hadn't tried to make them beautiful or advanced. They had made them effective, durable, and deadly to a specific enemy. And centuries later, that decision had saved the galaxy. Now, as the ancient fleet regrouped and prepared to hunt down any remaining Devourers, the Council was learning a valuable lesson about the difference between advancement and effectiveness. Sometimes, the simplest solution was the best one. 1 month after the Great Battle, the Council chambers were packed for a special ceremony. The massive windows showed the ancient fleet floating proudly in orbit, their battle-scarred hulls now wearing fresh coats of paint, marking them as official Council defense ships. Dr. Thompson stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. Next to him, Dr. Allen and Admiral Reed sat with proud smiles. On a large display behind them, images showed crews cleaning and restoring the old ships, preparing them for their new role as guardians of the galaxy. 300 years ago, Thompson began, humanity faced an enemy that nearly destroyed us. We didn't beat the Devourers with fancy technology or advanced AI. We beat them by building ships that were simple, strong, and effective. He gestured to the fleet visible through the windows. Our ancestors knew the Devourers might return. So they left us these ships, these weapons, this knowledge. They buried the memory of the war to heal from its horrors, but they made sure we would have the tools to fight if the enemy ever came back. The council leader stood up, walking to join Thompson at the podium. "We owe humanity a great debt," he announced, "not just for saving us now, but for having the wisdom to prepare for this day centuries ago." Behind them, the display showed new images, council engineers studying the ancient ships' designs, learning from their layered armor and simple but effective weapons. Already, new ships were being built combining modern technology with the proven defensive systems of the old fleet. "The ancient fleet will remain our first line of defense," the council leader continued. "But its legacy is more than just protection. It has taught us that progress isn't always about making things more complex. Sometimes it's about finding the right solution and making it work perfectly." Admiral Reed stepped forward next. "I was wrong about these ships," he admitted to the assembly. "I called them primitive, obsolete, worthless. But they saved us all because they were built with a purpose, not for show. Every piece of technology on them exists for a reason." Dr. Allen brought up new scans on the display. "We're still learning new things about their design. The layered armor doesn't just stop biological weapons. It's also incredibly effective against modern energy weapons. The simple computers can't be hacked by any known method. Even their nuclear reactors are more efficient than some of our modern power systems." Thompson smiled as he watched council members taking notes, their earlier dismissal of primitive technology completely forgotten. "But the most important lesson," he said, "isn't about the technology itself. It's about remembering why we build things." He brought up one final image, the original blueprint of the Titan, with notes from its designers. "Our ancestors didn't build these ships to impress anyone. They built them to protect humanity. Every decision was made with that single purpose in mind. The council leader raised his hand for attention, which is why, by unanimous vote, the council has created a new division, the Legacy Fleet Command. Dr. Thompson will serve as its first admiral, with Dr. Allen as Chief of Research and Admiral Reed as Strategic Commander. Applause filled the chamber. Thompson looked out at the ancient ships, remembering how everyone had laughed at them just a month ago. Now they were the most respected vessels in known space. The Devourers are gone, he said finally, driven back to whatever dark place they came from. But we won't forget again. These ships will remain on guard, ready to protect not just humanity, but all sentient life. As the ceremony ended, Thompson, Allen, and Reed stood at the window, watching crews working on the ancient vessels. Some were being upgraded with modern sensors and communication systems, but their core design, the thick armor, the massive railguns, the simple computers, would remain unchanged. You know what I love most about these old ships, Allen said softly. They're proof that sometimes the best solutions aren't the prettiest or the most advanced. They're just the ones that work. Thompson nodded, watching as the TITN's main guns rotated in a test pattern, still ready to defend the galaxy after centuries of sleep. The ancient fleet had taught the Council a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Never laugh at something just because it seems primitive. Sometimes, the old ways are the best ways.